This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. We're very fortunate tonight to have as our guest the Governor of Alabama, Dr. Robert Bentley. Governor, good to have you on.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be here.
Last time you were on, it was about a week or two before the election, and the polls looked good. You were going to win, and we're glad to have you back on again. But I'd say this about that, you you probably have the worst job to not make any money at it to run the state of Alabama in this economic. I was telling Jennifer before we went on the show, I think you inherited a ship of state, and I've written this in my columns many times. The publisher's tired of hearing it. It's like walking on the deck of the Titanic. I mean, this state was reeling financially, and you aren't taking a salary yet, are you?
No, and we're still not in good shape, Steve. We felt that the 2013 budget would be our worst budget, and it is going to be. It's the worst year that we've had. And the reason it is this is the first real budget that we've had since 2008. 2009, 2010, 2011, they were somewhat fake budgets because we had stimulus dollars from the federal government. And then last year, we had money from the unrealized capital gains out of the Alabama Trust Fund that propped up the general fund. This year, we have none of that. And so this, for the first time in 3 or 4 years, is really a true budget. Really, this is how the budget should have looked in 2009, but because of the stimulus dollars and the one-time money we had from the state, it didn't look that way. But it's going to be a very difficult year. We inherited some very difficult times. But
like I said, the worst year is next year.
Next year is the worst year.
Yeah.
I really believe it is, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions next year on how we're going to handle that. But the people have been very good, and I believe they have trusted me, and know that we're going to try to make the best decisions for the state of Alabama and the people of the state, and so we're just going to have some tough things that we're going to have to look at.
You know, I said that in a column recently. I wrote about the governor's home counties, and I wrote about where they'd all originally been from. It's hard to tell where governors are from because you, for example, born in Shelby County in Columbiana, and then moved back to practice your medicine in Tuscaloosa. And take Fob James, started his business born in Chambers, started his business in Lee, and then now lives in Baldwin. So it's hard to tell, where folks are from. But one thing I also compared in that column was that unlike a lot of past governors who made politics their career, and examples would be obviously George Wallace. From the cradle, he was running for governor.
Right.
Don Sigmund was running for governor since he was born, and probably little Jim Folsom. I mean, you take those three. I mean, the governors are past, but you're doing it more like a civic involvement. I mean, you had established your practice in medicine for a long time, and then with the legislature for 8 years. Or was it 12 or 8 years?
8 years.
8 years in the legislature. Then, and became governor, and obviously not taking a salary. You're doing it for as a civic duty, and I think that's admirable for you to do that. And I think it's admirable for you not to take a salary. Just maybe helping the state coffers a little bit, but nevertheless, I think you did inherit a pretty bad ship of state. And one thing that was done also, talk about that Rolling Reserve Act that Greg Canfield passed, and then you made him ADO director, Representative from Vestavia. That'll resolve some of the problems of proration, don't you think?
Well, it has on the education side, and I had supported that when I was in the legislature because every third year we were having proration in the education trust fund, at least every third year, and even when I came in, I had to declare 3% proration this year. We're not going to have to do it next year, but
better budgeting.
Better budgeting, but we've had a little uptick in the economy, just a little bit this year as far as sales tax and income tax. But the rolling reserve budget is a way to budget taking the average over the last 10 to 15 years. Really, it'll be a 15-year rolling average, and taking that average to decide what next year's budget is. Now, the only problem is in 2013, we have to look back at the 2011 budget, which was the last complete budget. And so because of that, we're going to be down $108 million for the 2013 budget.
In the education budget?
In the education budget. Now, that doesn't mean we're down that much money. It just means that we cannot use that money, and that $108 million that we'll be down will have to be put somewhere else. But it can be put in our rainy day fund.
Yeah, it needs to be. It was depleted when that was also depleted when you took office. You had no resources.
Everything was depleted when I took office.
Yeah, you had nothing to go to. One thing that's interesting, though, and we were talking earlier about the fact that you make your best friends when you're in legislature. You make lifetime friendships, and you've called on several of your buddies that sat by you in that area of the House.
That's right. And
put them in your cabinet. Talk about Matt Gibson and William Thigpen. We've had on the show, and Greg Canfield. You made ADO director.
That's
Seth
right.
was ADO director before that, and then Spencer Collier. And if you go back, Neil Morrison.
That's right.
You know, he was in the House with you for once, was he not?
He was. And, well, you get to know each other very well when you serve together in the House or the Senate.
And you know you can trust them.
You do. You do. You know who you can trust and who you can't trust. And you know their work ethic, and you know what kind of people they are because you're around them all day long, and even if you go out to eat with them at dinner at night, you know what kind of people they are. So it's always good to pick people that you know the quality of people that you're choosing.
One thing, one of your buddies we had on, Dr. Bob Mullins, who was your medical school buddy, and I was talking to Jennifer, I was thinking, and he explained this about that y'all's wives grew up together, he and Montgomery. Diane and his wife grew up.
They did.
And they introduced y'all, met through them.
That's right. Actually, Bob and I grew up together in Columbiana. Both went to medical school. He was a year ahead of me in high school, but because I graduated in 3 years, I caught up with him. And we went to medical school together. We were roommates together the first year in medical school, and he was dating Janine, his wife. And so they introduced Diane and me.
Y'all went to graduate school at Alabama.
I had finished. We were in medical school at that time, and that's right, in undergraduate school at Alabama.
Bob went to undergraduate at Alabama.
He did. And so we just swapped roommates.
yeah. But anyway, that's he had to get a good job talking about the Medicaid, and that's
a tough job.
It is, Dr. Bentley. It's going to be a heck of a. I've had legislators on this show that sit there and say, Steve, if we don't resolve the growth in Medicaid, it's going to take the whole general fund budget. What % of the general fund budget is about now? It's about over half, isn't it?
Well, it's not quite that much, but it's of the one. This last year, we had about a $1.6, $1.7 billion budget. We had about a $600 million of that was Medicaid. This year, we'll have about a $1.3 billion budget because we're going to be down $300 or $400 million, probably over $400 million in the general fund budget, and we will have to cut Medicaid, and we understand that.
First time ever, wouldn't it? Be the first?
Well, we're just having to do some things in all of government to make ends meet. And you know, when you don't have enough money and we have to balance the budget, we don't have any choice. You know that. How you served in the legislature, and you know, it's constitutional that we have to have a balanced budget.
Wallace raised taxes.
Raised taxes.
Wallace raised taxes.
Yeah.
We had, but it wasn't anything like this. But he called them revenue enhancement measures in the 80s.
I know. And now, one of the things that I have, that's right, I have promised the people of Alabama that we're going to absolutely do the best that we can with the amount of money that we have without raising taxes. Now, that means that we're going to have to look and make decisions on how we use the money that we have. You know, one of the problems that we have in this state, there aren't but 3 states in the country that have 2 budgets.
Just 3?
Just 3. At least that's all I've been told. I've asked my finance director to find out how many states have 2 budgets. None of the states that surround us have 2 budgets. They all have just 1 budget, and they work out of 1 budget. And the problem that we have, and you know this, with the general fund, there are no growth taxes in the general fund. So even when the economy picks back up, the general fund, which funds everything but education, is not going to pick up very quickly. And so we're going to have to make a decision, or I would like to allow the people of Alabama to make that decision on whether or not we have two budgets or whether or not we have one budget. And I personally think that we will never get out of the hole that we're in unless we have a unified budget in this state. Now, I know the education people are all against that, and I can hear it now that the governor cares more about the prisoners than he does about the children. I mean, I know what the arguments are, but you know, I have to look at not just the education budget or the general fund budget. I have to look at the overall state of Alabama and make decisions, what I think are the right decisions and what will help us in the future. And I think what will help us in the future if we were to have one budget. Now, I know that we need to limit how much Medicaid is being spent, but the problem with Medicaid is
it's matching. You're getting federal money when you do it.
We are getting federal dollars for it, but also with the Affordable Health Care Act, if it stays in place, I hope it's repealed. I mean,
it may be.
And I hope it is. I think it's one of the worst pieces of legislation that the federal government has ever written. And I hope it's repealed. But if it is not, then by 2014, we're going to have another 368,000 people on Medicaid.
That's what the legislators were talking about.
Yes.
If that act is not repealed, that was the point they were making.
Right. That's right.
They're saying,
and it's going to be catastrophic for the states because we just really cannot afford. This country cannot afford the Affordable Health Care Act. We just cannot afford it, and businesses can't afford it. Individuals can't afford it, and certainly states that will have to put another 368,000 people on it. We can't afford it. So we're just going to have to wait and see. And I still believe, though, that we need to look down the road to the future and look at the possibility, but now of a unified budget. Now, it would be up to the people, though.
Will you propose that in the upcoming session to have a right to put on the ballot?
I'm starting to talk about it, and I know the way I'm starting to talk about it is I talk about it like today. I'm talking about it in speeches, and I know I'm already getting opposition, but I expect that. And we may not have the votes. We may not have the votes to have a constitutional vote on it. But it would be up to the people. It would allow the people of the state to make a decision. If the people say, we want two budgets, we'll do the best we can with two budgets. But all I can say is it would be easier to work with one budget, and there'd be growth money in the general fund so that we wouldn't have this problem every year with not just Medicaid, not just with our prisoners, but with our highway patrolmen, with people trying to get a birth certificate or a death certificate or autopsies or, you know, there's just so, mental health, there are just so many things that are funded out of the general fund. You know, if we don't fund Medicaid, people say, well, let's just don't fund. If you don't fund Medicaid adequately, then every hospital in the state is going to have problems. And many rural hospitals will go under if they don't have Medicaid dollars.
Governor, you know, talking about the legislative session and long lines, I don't think, did anybody realize the ramifications of the pragmatic workings of that immigration law? I think there's been some repercussions from that. I mean, the long lines at the courthouse, is that where you're going to go on revising that bill or offering the, just a practical, you know, it's just the average person in Jefferson County is having to stand in line, from what I hear, 3 or 4 hours to get the car tag renewed.
Well, they are, but now we did put in place to take care of that, the AL Verify, that all they have to do is they can go online and they can be qualified immediately because if you have a valid driver's license in Alabama, you have to show your birth certificate to get that. So we know that you're a citizen of Alabama if you have a valid driver's license. But there were ramifications, and we need to clarify it. We need to simplify it. We need to clarify it. We need to make it easier for our law enforcement officers to enforce it. And we don't want to appear to be uncaring. But let me say this. There are two things that I want everybody to realize when we talk about simplifying and clarifying and all of this. We are not going to repeal this bill. This bill is in place and it's not going to be repealed. The second thing is everyone needs to realize that if you live and work in Alabama, that you have to be legal. And if you're a company and you're hiring people, you have to hire legal people. And we're going to use E-Verify and AL-Verify. We're going to make sure if you're a company here that you will do what's right. Now, there is nothing unjust, unethical, unwarranted in asking people to obey the law. And this is federal law. This is not something new that we've dreamed up. This is what the law has always been. And all we're going to do is we're going to ask people in the state to obey the law. Those two things are not going to change. Now, I know the editorial boards, you know, they get all bent out of shape. I don't know why they want to be on the side of things that are illegal, but they are.
Yeah.
And but I also don't want us to leave the impression with international companies that we're not open for business in this state, that we don't, but because we do care about international companies, starting with Mercedes, our Hyundai plant here, but they do it right anyway. Their workers come and they have the visas. And if you have a driver's license from South Korea, or if you have a driver's license from Germany, you come here, all you have to do is present that driver's license to the police, and that is a valid driver's license in Alabama, and you can drive. We have right now a reciprocal agreement with Germany where you can get an they can get an Alabama license just by giving their German driver's license, or we can do the same thing in Germany. We're working on that same reciprocal agreement with South Korea. But we don't want to leave the appearance, and I know a lot of people, you know, Dr. Bronner gets out and talks about this. He shouldn't talk about it because he really hurts the state by doing that. Because we don't want to leave that impression. We're going to work very closely with all of our international companies, and even right now we're involved with a number of international companies, and we will have some announcements either by the end of this year or by the early next year of some major companies, international companies that are coming to Alabama.
Governor, as you close in on the end of the first year, you know, the legislative session was very productive. We just talked about the immigration bill, the Rolling Reserve Act, repeal the DROP Act, but also you had some economic development incentives, and the unemployment rate has gone down since you've been governor. It's not the way you need where you can get a salary yet, but you got 10% when you took office. It's down about 9.2, isn't it?
It's 9.3 the last time.
Yeah.
And
so now, but the economic, it didn't get the kind of publicity but that was one of the things you spearheaded, and actually you had introduced that bill when you were a legislator. Did it not? The one I'm talking about.
We did, and we have not. It has not been publicized as much as it should, especially for small businesses, where they can, if they will hire someone in a new job, they can get $1,000 tax credit if it's a $10 an hour job and they keep them longer than a year. They can get a $1,000 tax credit on their taxes next year. And a lot of people, you know, sometimes we pass these laws and they're not publicized as much as they should be. We also gave a 200% deduction if you buy health insurance for your employees. And one of the bills that we passed, it was called Made in Alabama bill. It was a very somewhat confusing bill, but it was written for international companies. And it was tax credits that you could take from one company and you could either sell to or give to another company. And this would somewhat mitigate the cost of the tariffs that they're having to pay as they're transitioning from that country to America. Once they get in this country, then once they produce the products, they don't have to pay the tariffs. But that has helped us get some Chinese companies and some Asian companies by the passage of that bill. Now, we were sued by AEA, and it's tied up in court right now, but we expect it to be upheld, and we'll probably be able to use that.
You talked about that health insurance deduction, but didn't you create a commission on health insurance reform and also homeowners reform? Those two insurance.
We did, both.
By executive order, you created those two commissions.
We did. The Health Insurance Exchange, and we don't want people to get confused. This is not the National Health Insurance Exchange under the Affordable Health Care Act. This is more of a marketplace, and this is what we'll look at, more of a marketplace to try to encourage other companies to come into Alabama and write health insurance, and so that people will be, it'll be easy for them to go online and to pick and choose what they would like as far as their health coverage is concerned. And we're working on that at the present time, and we'll probably have some legislation to take care of that once the legislature gets in session. The second thing is what we call the Affordable Homeowners Insurance Commission.
This has to do with the Gulf Coast.
It does, and at first we called it the Coastal Insurance
Yeah, that's what it was,
Commission.
yeah.
We called it that, but after the tornadoes, we saw that 13,000 people in Alabama had lost their insurance because of the tornadoes.
That's right.
And so then we changed the name to the Affordable Homeowners Insurance Commission. And in fact, they're meeting today, and we're going to go by and see them probably when we leave.
They want to have a special session, the folks in Mobile and Baldwin, on that particular issue. Can that be addressed in the regular session?
It can be, and we would have that if we had things ready yet. It is a very complicated issue. It really is, and no state has solved it. If we solve this problem, we'll be the first state that has solved it. But my commission has worked very diligently on it, and as I say, they are working even as we speak. And I hope that we will have some recommendations by the time the legislative session starts.
Governor, you know, you inherited, like we said earlier, a ship of state, probably the worst that anybody's ever known. I don't know what the Depression governors had to face, but it couldn't be much worse than this economically. But what is, do you think, the most traumatic and devastating thing? The tornadoes your first year?
It was.
You saw it firsthand, and of course your hometown was just ravaged, you know, Tuscaloosa. What were your, I mean, there you were facing the worst economic situation the state's in, knowing that 2013 was looming, and April 27th came with those tornadoes. Did you realize that nobody thought they'd be as bad as they were?
No, and you know, you prepare somewhat, and I thought of this before I was inaugurated, not this, but I thought, now, how are we going to handle a natural disaster? And, you know, I had met with my EMA people, and we had made some preparations, as much as you can, but you know, you never know what the future's going to hold, and you never know how bad it will be. But on the 100th day, and that's when people judge you a lot of times in your administration, how did you do the first 100 days? On our 100th day, April 27th.
That's when it occurred, on the 100th day.
That's when it occurred, and you know, you have to, nobody gives you a book on how to be governor.
No.
You know, and so what do you rely on? Well, you rely on what you have done in your past, how you have been involved with other situations. I mean, you know, practicing medicine helped me because, you know, I've ran emergency rooms, you know, even before I specialized. In the military, I ran so I had confronted emergencies before and had to stay in control. So you know, you have to be under control. You yourself, you have to keep others in control or under control. You have to be very concise in your decisions when you make decisions, and I think that we did that. I think that we made decisions very quickly. We declared a state of emergency immediately. We called out the National Guard the first day immediately, and let me tell you that our National Guard, which, by the way, they're the best National Guard in the country, they did a fantastic job, just keeping everybody calm. So the concise decisions that you have to make. And then I think more important, I think that people that are hurting, you have to be compassionate and you have to care about them. So I think that...
little town of Phil Campbell up there was wiped out. They going to get back their industry, you think?
They are. We worked very hard on that. It took me several months to convince Vanity Fair, Wrangler, to come back, and not only are they going to have the 150 jobs, I convinced them to add another 100 to it, and they're going to have 250 jobs in Phil Campbell. Well, actually, it's in Hackleburg.
Hackleburg, yes, right.
And it's 250 jobs, and they're coming back, and so that was major.
Speaking of that area, it had to hurt you to see your hometown and all that area. Well, you had a lot of patients all through that area.
I did.
And you could see that when the vote came in. The V.O. Key book on Alabama politics says that Alabama's got the most pronounced friends and neighbors political history, and you can see it. When I saw those votes coming in election night, and I was talking tonight on television, I said V.O. Key would be impressed, because you had carried all those counties, not just Tuscaloosa. You were getting 80-something% in every one of those counties. But I asked you about that, and you have a lot of patience up there.
We do. You know, it is interesting. You know, they knew me and my hometown when we had the runoff in the primary election. We had 87% of the vote. We won 87% of the vote in Tuscaloosa County. But in the general election, there were counties that surrounded Tuscaloosa County that normally were Democrat counties. We won Pickens County 58%, Fayette County 69%, Lamar County 69%.
Yeah.
And so when you see...
You had a clinic up there one time.
I did over in Pickens County. Every Tuesday I would go over and see patients. So, you know, the people knew me and they trusted me there as their doctor. And I think the people of the state trusted me, and I think that's why they voted for me. But they didn't know what kind of governor I would be. And I think that over the last year, they have watched me and to see how I would react. You know, I do believe that as governors, we are judged by how we react in natural disasters.
I think you are. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
We've only got about a minute left. How you like being away from Tuscaloosa? You and Diane live there over 30, 35 years. Your children and grandchildren are up there.
They are.
I always wonder how private is living in the governor's mansion. Don't you have school children coming in there all the time and stuff like that?
Well, we haven't had as much because the ceiling fell in, and we had to have that repaired. And
of course, Diane grew up in Montgomery.
She did grow up in Montgomery. You know, Montgomery is now home when we're here. Do we miss Tuscaloosa? We do, but you know, I love what I'm doing. I love being governor. I really, the people of this state are they're so wonderful to me, and it's just been it's been a privilege to serve as their governor.
Well, you're doing a good job, and you're doing it for the right reason. Your heart's in the right place. But time's up, Governor. We sure thank you for being on Alabama Politics and taking the time out of your schedule. You had to fly to Baldwin County this morning.
I did.
For a plant opening, and got to meet with the commission on insurance this afternoon. So we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. And we thank you, viewers, for watching Alabama Politics. Please tune in next week. Again, our guest has been the Governor of Alabama, Dr. Robert Bentley. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Steve.
Governor.
This has been Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, a production of Troy University Television. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Troy University, its administration, faculty, staff, or students.